Welcome to Walking in Abraham's Footsteps, the eternal art of Jewish hospitality. The reason we're talking about this subject, and I want to apologize for my voice, I'm auditioning for a new position, becoming the cantor, and my original voice wasn't good, so I'm trying.
May you not get the job.
Rabbi, time tea with honey.
Oh, I'm getting medical advice. I had some tea and honey.
Hyme. Fresh from England.
Okay, we'll talk later. The reason we're talking about hospitality is because the Torah portion of this week, entitled Vayera, is about Abraham's hospitality. And it's not common for the Torah to get into a story with so much detail as it does when it talks about Abraham's hospitality. We don't know very much about Abraham up to his 75th birthday. The Torah doesn't tell us anything about him. The only thing we know about him before he was 75 was transmitted to us in the oral Torah and later on put into writing in the Talmud and Midrash. So everything about Abraham is somewhat obscure, but we do know a lot about his hospitality. It's a whole section devoted to that. When does this hospitality occur? It occurs 3 days after his circumcision, at the young age of 99. I don't know if Abraham was licensed to do a medical procedure, but he did it anyhow. So don't report him. So, because the Torah talks so much about Abraham's hospitality, it seems to suggest that the defining characteristic of Abraham, or one of the defining, and maybe the most defining, is his hospitality. So that's why we're talking about hospitality from the Jewish and Torah perspective. If we made a survey of all the Jewish institutions that a Jewish community has, and every Jewish community should have a synagogue, a mikveh, a school, a Jewish school that teaches Judaism. Tragically, we also need a cemetery, we need hospitals, nursing homes. I don't know if we need it, but some communities have a JCC. And then there's the Jewish Federation, or similar organizations that collect money to help support all the other organizations. So if I had to ask you which of all these is the most important, the answer is none of the above. It's the Jewish home. There's no question, it's not even a close second. There's no other institution that is as central to Jewish life and the preservation of Jewish life as the Jewish home, even more than a synagogue. What happened, unfortunately, in the 19th and 20th centuries, 21st centuries, is that Jews forgot what it is to have a Jewish home, but they still wanted to maintain a Jewish identity, so they gravitate towards other Jewish institutions, such as a synagogue, or even a JCC, which has a Jewish ownership to it. But they forgot that Judaism originates in and comes from the home, more than any other institution. If you didn't have synagogues, but you had a Jewish home, Judaism would still flourish. But if you have synagogues and no Jewish home, there's very little chance that Judaism will continue for the next generation, because it's up to the home to produce devoted Jewish individuals. So the question is, what makes a Jewish home Jewish? So the answer is there are many things that happen in a Jewish home. Number one, food. Food is an important part of Jewish life. of life in general, but especially of Jewish life. You know the story. They tried to kill us. We won. Let's eat. That's the traditional refrain that we apply to Jewish holidays. So it's the food, the kosher food in a Jewish home. That's much of what a Jewish home is. The mezuzah on the doorpost, and God willing, next week we'll talk about mezuzah. The mezuzah on the doorpost, but also an integral part of a Jewish home. Besides the Jewish holidays, of course, Shabbos is a very, very central part of what it means to have a Jewish home. Lighting the Shabbos candles, making Kiddush, having a Shabbos meal, having relatives and friends over. These are all very much a part of a Jewish home. But there's also another part of Jewish home that has lost some of its relevance in the modern age, but it's nevertheless never lost its significance, and that is hospitality. So let's try to understand, what does that mean when we say hospitality? The Hebrew term for hospitality is Hachnasat Orchim. Literally, that means bringing Orchim, guests, more specifically wayfarers, travelers, into your home. If you invite your neighbors, your friends to your home to share a meal with you, that's a nice thing. That's a sign of unity, friendship, and that's definitely a positive thing. But that's not what we mean by Hachnasat Orchim. Hachnasat Orchim technically is when someone is traveling and doesn't have a home because they're traveling, they're on the road, and you provide them with a temporary place to live, to eat, to sleep, and to have a place where they could call their home temporarily. That's what the term Hachnasat Orchim denotes. Not just inviting friends over your house, which is a good thing, I'm not trying to put that down, but providing people who don't have a home, homeless people, or as they now call them, houseless people. I don't understand what's the difference between homeless and houseless, but language changes, it evolves. Just an aside, we laugh sometimes at the way people change the language. I just heard someone say to unlive someone. Instead of killing is to unlive. It's interesting that the Rebbe was very much for using positive language, and even when you're talking about something negative, don't use the negative, but use the positive. The Rebbe, I don't know if it was joking or serious, but someone mentioned that he's doing studies about the Far East. So the Rebbe says, why call it the Far East? Call it the East that isn't so near. Don't try to focus on language to develop positive language. The Rebbe didn't like it. It's interesting. There are only 2 countries in the world that call a hospital a place for sick people. Germany, a Krankenhaus, I think they call it. If anyone knows German, correct me if I'm wrong. And in Israel, it's called Beit Cholim, the house of the sick. And the Rebbe very strongly said, change that title. When you come to a hospital, you don't want to be told you're a sick person. You want to be told you're going to be healed. Call it Beit Refuah, the house of healing.
Is that Beit Cholim? Is that the modern Hebrew? Only in the modern Hebrew found?
I guess so. What?
I mean, it is.
Yeah, that's.
It's not a term from ancient Hebrew.
No.
And how do you say cemetery?
Beit HaChayim, the house of the living.
House of the living, which is the opposite.
Right. Euphemisms are very common in Jewish discourse. So anyhow, that was just an aside. So the person who is houseless or homeless, and you provide them with a place to stay, that's the ultimate expression of kindness, and that is what Abraham is known for. Because when Abraham invited the 3 angels disguised as humans into his home, these were people he never met before. These were people traveling. He had absolutely no relationship with them, and didn't even know if they were good people. They could have been criminals. In fact, one of the things that he asked them to do was to wash their feet. So Rashi quotes a midrash that says, why did he ask them to wash their feet? Well, it's nice to have clean feet when you walk into someone's home, but it's much more than that. There was a pagan custom to worship the dust of the feet, and he didn't want pagan traditions entering his home. So he says, well, first wash off your paganism, and then you're more than welcome to enter my house. So he was talking of people who he considered to be very, very lowly people, pagans, people who worshipped dust that accumulates on their feet. And yet he brought them into his home. That's the mitzvah of Hachnasat Orchim. And Abraham is the ultimate model for it. Now, Abraham had a nephew. Everyone has a nephew that is not really, doesn't really live up to the expectations of the uncle. Does anyone not have a nephew like that?
I do not have it.
Okay. But Abraham had a nephew who was not exactly a very moral person. His name was Lot. And nevertheless, in spite of the fact that he deviated from Abraham's righteousness, his piety, his devotion to God, his morality, one thing he kept, he had this hospitality gene in him. When the angels came to destroy Sodom, they came to his house. He brought them into his home, even though in Sodom that was a capital crime to bring in guests. And here's the juxtaposition of Sodom and Abraham. Abraham was the ultimate extreme example of hospitality, and the Sodomites were the ultimate and extreme opposite of hospitality, where it became a capital crime to bring guests into your home. How dare you take someone and let them benefit from our resources? So, and yet, but Lot, even though he lived in Sodom and he wasn't a moral person, he didn't follow in Abraham's footsteps, he nevertheless still maintained this devotion to inviting guests into his home, even at personal peril. There's also a biblical story with this woman, Shunammite woman, who had Elisha, the prophet Elisha, come to her house. Now, why do we have to be hospitable? What's the basis for it? The basis for it is two things. Number one, Maimonides explains, it says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself. It's a general commandment that requires of us to do to others that we would want to have done for us. That's what it means, to love your fellow as yourself. Loving your fellow doesn't mean you have this passionate love, although that would be the ideal. Loving your fellow means whatever you would want done for yourself, you do for your fellow. Do you want a roof over your head? Of course you want a roof over your head. Do you want to be traveling and be without any resources? No, you'd want to have a place to stay. So do that to another as well. That's one source of this mitzvah. Another source of this mitzvah, the Torah tells us we have to follow in God's ways. And just like God is compassionate, God does acts of kindness. Throughout the Torah we find God doing the acts of kindness, and we have to emulate God. And one act of kindness is to be hospitable. But the Torah never really commands you specifically to be hospitable. You don't need a specific commandment because it's based on the general commandments of loving your fellow as yourself and following God's footsteps. But the rabbis were always there to supplement the teachings of the Torah, and they said there's a specific mitzvah of gemilut chasadim, of the act of kindness, which involves hospitality.
They ask what the word
Hachnasat Orchim, yes.
What does this translate as?
Literally, Hachnasat means bringing in. An orach is a traveler.
From the derivation of the root or, light?
No. Orach is a traveler. Orach means a way, a path. Travelers go on a road, like another word for derech, right? Now, the Talmud makes a very startling claim, and it bases it on the story of Abraham, that if you have a choice to speak to God, God comes to visit you, and then someone comes who needs a place to stay, Who do you tell to wait? God or the traveler? You say to God, you could wait. I have to take care of this traveler. That inviting a guest into your home, welcoming this guest into your home, takes precedence over welcoming God into your home. How do we know that? Because the story of Abraham's hospitality is in the context of God coming and appearing to Abraham. That's how the Torah portion begins. Vayera Elov Hashem, and God appears to him. Why did God appear to Abraham? Because he had just undergone circumcision, and he was ailing, and God came to visit him because it's a mitzvah to visit the sick, and this is the source that we have a mitzvah to visit the sick as well. So God is coming to Abraham, and what does Abraham say? He says to God, wait, God, I'm taking care of these guests, when he sees these three pagans coming towards him. He pays attention to the pagans even as he's speaking to God. From this we derive that welcoming guests takes precedence over welcoming God. What is the logic behind that? What's the rationale behind that? The simple rationale is God is thrilled that you stopped talking to him and you took care of the guests, because God put us in this world to do a mitzvah. And the mitzvah at that point is to take these guests into your home. So you're going to say, well, I'm busy, I don't have to do the mitzvah because I'm talking to God. If you're talking to God, you're going to do what God wants. That's the simple rationale. But there's a deeper understanding that I heard from my father, of blessed memory. I mentioned this many times. The Talmud says that a person without a home is not fully human. In other words, it strips, a homeless person loses their identity, their human identity. Now, why is that? So my father explained that God, everything begins with God. The reason why there are things happening in this world is because they happen in relation to God and his relationship with this world. God created this world because he wanted a home. That's why he created us. He wanted a home in this physical world. That's a famous statement of the Midrash that is the basis of much of Hasidic philosophy, that God wanted a dwelling place in the lowest of realms, not in the highest spiritual realms where there are angels. He wanted it in this lowly realm where we have evil, where we have people who are corrupt, where we have all the negatives, where we have darkness and pain and suffering. And God says, I want you to create a place where I could feel comfortable, where I could live. And because that's God's very reason for creating the whole universe, it manifests itself in humanity as well. That just like God needs a dwelling place, God needs a home. But when I say he needs a home, he chooses to need the home. Because God doesn't need anything. If he's God, he doesn't need anything. But God chooses to want a home and say, this is what I need, that you have to create this home for me. And if you don't create this home, God feels homeless. Every time we do something contrary to God's will, you're causing God to withdraw from being revealed in this world. That means you just chase God out of his home. God becomes homeless. So when you see someone who is homeless, even if it's temporary homelessness, which is what a guest is, a traveler is temporarily without a home, you are giving that person a status of a full-fledged human being. Because if you don't have a home, if you don't have food, you're a starving person. It's terrible tragedy, and we have to feed the hungry. If a person doesn't have other amenities, it's sad. But it doesn't detract from their humanity. Without a home, it detracts from their humanity. And the reason for that is, where can you really be yourself? When you're in public, you have a certain persona that is a public persona. You have to act in a certain way, which is proper. But that's not who you really are. Who can you really be who you really are in your home? That's where you are yourself. So your full humanity is manifested in your home. So the person who is homeless doesn't have that opportunity to manifest his or her humanity. When you give them a place to live, again, temporarily, you're restoring their humanity to them. It's like you created a human being. Well, if you create a human being, you become God's partner in creation. So when you welcome God into your home, as beautiful as that is, if you can speak to God and welcome Him to your home, you're on the receiving end. When you give a place to stay for a homeless person, or even temporarily homeless, you're not just welcoming God, you're a partner with God. That's a much greater achievement to be God's partner than just to be on the receiving end from God. Yes?
How about Hashem creates the world. He creates the world for us to know Him. That's for us to know Him, whatever benefits that gives us, a lot, that's the creation. When we bless God, we don't bless God, we don't bless God to give God something. We do it for the privilege of us to be able to bless God. That's given to us. In this situation, we provide a home for God. That's for the privilege for us to be able to give Him, to feel that we're giving Him something. That's creating a home for God is for our sake, and He enjoys seeing, presumably, us.
It's not just for our sake. It's to fulfill what God wants. There are two ways you can relate to God. You can relate to God, I'm doing this because I want to have a relationship with God, which is great. But there's a deeper level of saying, I'm not here for my relationship. I'm here to do what God wants.
Right, but God wants it for us. God is, in His humility, He's giving it to us.
There's no problem with that, yes. But what does God want? God wants a home. That's what He says He wants. That's what He declares. I want a place to live in this world. And that manifests itself in humanity as well, that a human being needs to have a home. And when you give someone a home, you become like a partner to God. That's the point. The Talmud makes another point, that there are various mitzvahs that we do that the reward for which we don't get in this world. We get it in the next world. We get it in the afterlife. Not necessarily in this world. So you can do a mitzvah and you could still suffer in this world. And you ask, well, where's the reward? The answer generally is the reward is in the next world. But there are exceptions to that. And some people recite this every morning. These are the things that we eat the fruit in this world, but the principle remains for the future. We're only getting the dividends. And one of those things is hospitality, where we eat the fruit or the dividends in this world, but the principal reward remains intact for the world to come. According to Meiri is 13th century Talmudic sage. He describes hospitality as the greatest mitzvah. Now there are a lot of statements from different rabbis about which is the greatest mitzvah. So we say we agree with all of them. They're all the greatest mitzvah. But not every mitzvah is called the greatest, but this is one of them that is called the greatest. Another thing the Talmud says, that a person who stays a long time at his table, you extend your meal, you will have your life extended as well. So the question is why? Eating a long meal, you just gain weight that way. That's not necessarily good for your health. So the commentaries explain, because the longer you're at your meal, the more likely you'll have more guests coming to your home. Again, in America, it doesn't sound, just because I'm eating a long meal doesn't mean that people are going to knock on my door and come in to partake. But in the olden days, that was common. People would knock on the door, person who needs a place to stay, and say, can I share with you in your meal? And you would be able to do more of hospitality. And the table is likened to the altar in the temple. Just like the altar, when they brought sacrifices, it brought a closer relationship between God and the world was able to receive greater energy. Same thing that happens when you have guests at your table. So important was hospitality that even though ideally people should not do a mitzvah because they're compelled to do it, they should do it because you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart, but a community had the right to enforce certain acts of kindness. So a community had the right to compel you to engage in hospitality. I don't like the type of hospitality that you'll engage in if you have to be forced to do it, but it's better than the absence of hospitality. So now let's talk a little bit about what are the obligations of the host. But before I go into that, it's important to preface that in Judaism, or in life in general, everything is divided into two. There's the giver and there's the receiver, the recipient. The doctor renders medical service. The patient receives it. You walk into a store, the vendor, he's on the giving end, he sells you a product, you're the receiver. And the same thing is true in every area of life. There's always someone, the rabbi teaches and the students listen, hopefully, and they receive. Or they bombard him with rotten tomatoes, either one or the other. But there's always someone on the receiving end, and there's always someone on the giving end. Judaism says, don't ask what your rights are. I think Precedence said something similar to that, but the Torah said it way before. Don't ask what rights, what they can do for you. Ask what you can do for them. In other words, using the example of a doctor. A doctor has obligations towards his patients. Number one, he shouldn't try to kill the patient. He should try to heal the patient. But the patient also has responsibilities vis-a-vis the doctor. The patient can't say, I have rights, I can barge into the doctor's office whenever I want. He has to have respect for the needs of the physician. When you're on the giving end, you have obligations to the recipient. When you're on the receiving end, you have obligations to the giver. Same thing is true with hospitality. There are obligations that a host has to his guests. And by the same token, there are obligations that the guests have towards the host. Just because the guest invites you into the home doesn't mean that you have rights to do whatever you want. That you can go into, pry into their private affairs, open up drawers and do things like that, which happens very often, but that's not right either. So what are the obligations of the host? The host has more obligations than the patient, the guest. Number one, he has to provide the person with food and drink, a place to sleep, and also escorting the guest. In the olden days, traveling was very dangerous, so you had to go with the guest a certain distance to show him that you're concerned about his safety and show them that you're willing to go with them. Nowadays, we don't have that issue as they used to have, but it's customary when a real guest comes to the home, that when they leave, you escort them outside. Why is escorting so important? Because in every act of kindness, there are two elements. This is an explanation the Rebbe gave once. There are two elements in every act of kindness. Let's say a person gives charity to a poor person. There's the act that you're taking care of the needs of the poor person. So it's the effect of your giving that is the focus. And then there's the personal kindness that you show. Every time you do a mitzvah to help someone, you're expressing your own kindness. And a person should try to cultivate that emotion of kindness. Now, you can give tzedakah, you can give charity without any kindness. The Talmud says something very interesting, that you're walking down the street and your wallet falls out of your pocket, you don't even know that it fell out, and a poor person comes and has money to buy a meal. You fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah. You get the credit for doing the mitzvah because the kindness that you show is not an integral part of the mitzvah. And the most important part of the mitzvah is taking care of the needs. How you do it is a secondary aspect. Yes, it's certainly good that you do it with kindness, but that's secondary to the taking care of the needs. If a person says, you know what, I'm not that morally sophisticated. I don't have feelings of kindness. I don't have compassion, but I'm going to still give charity to the poor. That's superior to the person who says, you know what? I'm first going to develop feelings of kindness. When I feel really kind and compassionate, then I'm going to give tzedakah. No, that's wrong. You should give even before you want to give. You should force yourself to give if you have to force yourself. Sometimes, I think I told the story many times, there was a rabbi in Jerusalem who was known to be very charitable, so poor people would come to him, and once, as he's sitting with his students, a poor person comes and he gives him a nice donation, and after the man leaves, he says to one of his students, call him back, and he gives him another donation. This happened once, so the students thought he probably reconsidered how much he wanted to give, and he realized that he didn't give enough. But then this repeated itself. Every time a poor person would come, he would give him a nice donation, the man would leave, and then he would send someone to get him back. So the students were puzzled by this, so they asked the rabbi, why don't you just give him the donation you intended to give? Why do you have to bring him back? He says, when I see a poor person, it hurts me. I feel pain when I see someone who's so deprived. So that when I give him the first donation, who am I giving it for? For myself, to get rid of my pain. I don't feel pain anymore once I give him a nice donation. Then, after I gave him the donation for myself, then I call him back to give it for him. So the idea behind this is that you give tzedakah, you give charity, even if you don't feel like giving, even if you do it for your selfish reasons. The most important thing is the giving itself. But then there's also an idea that you're doing it for the person. But when it comes to hospitality, the attitude is an integral part of giving. When it comes to charity, the poor person doesn't care that much about your attitude. If he needs to eat, he just wants the money to buy a sandwich. That's all he's thinking about. He doesn't care if you show him love, and that he's not trying to become your best friend. But when it comes to hospitality, it doesn't work that way. Hospitality is you're not just taking care of the needs of the person, you're also showing the person that you are concerned about them and that you're doing it out of kindness, and it's not something you're doing reluctantly, because a person who is a guest in a home and feels that the person who's giving you whatever it is that he's giving you, the food, the drink, the place to sleep, he's doing it begrudgingly because they have no choice, they have to do it, they feel compelled to do it, that takes away from your feeling of comfort. You feel very uncomfortable that you're taking someone else's food that they really don't want to give you. When you escort them after they finished eating and after they finished sleeping and after they got all the benefits, and you go out of your way to escort them, that shows that you not only gave them because you felt compelled, but you're also doing it out of the goodness of your heart, that you're doing it because you care for them, and that you're more than happy to have engaged in this act of hospitality. The first rule of hospitality is, as Shammai said, one should greet everyone with a cheerful countenance. That's everyone, but a guest is coming to your home. You shouldn't be frowning when they come in, oh, another guest, another schlepper, another beggar. But you should look at them and say, I'm so thrilled, come in. I'm so thrilled that you were able to come to my house. You're an honored guest. Even though Shammai was known to be a very stern and very tough and rough person, when a potential convert came to him and said, teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one foot, he took a ruler and chased him out. And yet it's the same Shammai whose first teaching that's mentioned in Ethics of the Fathers is greet everyone with a cheerful countenance. So the question is, was he inconsistent? He chases one guy out, and that wasn't a cheerful countenance. So the Rebbe once gave two explanations. Number one is his colleague Hillel is quoted in Ethics of the Fathers, where he says you should love peace, pursue peace, love everyone, and bring them close to the Torah. When he heard Hillel say that about loving everyone, it influenced him that he changed his attitude and he became a very welcoming person. But that's one of the important things when it comes to hospitality, to show a cheerful countenance, that you're thrilled that the person came. One of the commentators of the Mishnah says, do not give them bread with your face buried in the ground. In other words, begrudgingly. What about if you're miserable because something is not going right in your own life? Distract yourself from your own problems and anxieties. You don't have to share with them your tzaras, your misfortunes, your problems. Show them when a cheerful countenance doesn't just mean a fake smile. It means suppress whatever negative feelings you have. It has nothing to do with the guest. The guest is not your therapist. Place food in front of the guest immediately. Don't let the guest wait until you prepare the food. There's a story told of the great sage of the 20th century, the Chafetz Chaim. When we come home Friday night from the Shabbos service, there's a prayer that we say, Shalom Aleichem. We welcome the angels. The angels escort us. We welcome them. And we have songs associated with that Shalom Aleichem. So once someone came to the house of the Chafetz Chaim, and there were other guests there, and he skipped the Shalom Aleichem, and he went straight to the meal. So someone asked him, why are you skipping it? He said, because the angels could wait. People can't. So the angels will say it later. We'll welcome them later. Even if you have 1,000 servants, these are all statements from different commentaries. You should personally serve the guests. Don't just rely on the servants. Going further, one should treat one's guests as if they were his masters. Don't treat a guest, don't make him feel he's on the receiving end, you're on the giving end. Make them feel that this is their home and they're entitled to whatever it is that they have there. Make them feel, it's a cliche, feel at home. But when the person who you bring into your home starts to feel at home, you say, one second, I didn't really mean that. I just said it. Don't stare at a guest when he eats. Don't make them feel uncomfortable. If you have only one piece of bread, share it with the guest by breaking it in half and giving him the other half. You only have one slice of bread. Share it with the guest. A little story of my daughter-in-law's great-grandfather. He was a very holy rabbi, but very quirky. People would call him a eccentric, but he was a very holy man. And he lived in Russia. During World War II, there was a terrible famine. People were dying of starvation. People were just falling dead on the streets. And people were just searching for food. So a Jew who came from another town, who hadn't eaten in days, was looking around if anyone had food. So he invited him to his house. And he had 1 cup of milk. And the cup of milk, part of it had cream in it. I guess it wasn't homogenized, and the other part was watery. So he pours the cup into another cup and splits it in half, and puts the cup with the cream next to himself, and the watery part he gives to the guest. And the guest was happy because that's the only thing he had to eat in a few days. And he says to the guest, I'm not letting you drink that cup unless you say what I ask you to say. What do you want me to say? I'll say anything. I want you to say, look how disgusting the host is that he's keeping the creamy part for himself. He said, how can I say that to you? You're saving my life. He says, well, then you can't have the milk. So he has no choice, he says it. And as soon as he finished saying it, the rabbi takes the creamy part, gives it to the guest, and takes the watery part and drinks it. So the other guy had no choice. He had to take the creamy part. What was going on in his mind was, I want I don't want to feel like I'm a hero, that I gave away the creamy part. I want you to tell me that I'm a good for nothing nobody. I said he was eccentric, and no one says that that's the approach that everyone should take. But this was an extension, an extreme extension of this idea that you split everything and you even give your guest the better part. In Ethics of the Fathers, there's an expression there, let your house be wide open. And the model for this was Abraham. Abraham's tent, the Midrash tells us, had 4 entrances on each of the directions, that if someone would come by, they would find the entrance right where they were situated. They wouldn't have to go around the house to come inside, because maybe they'd see, I don't see the entrance, and pass by. He made sure. And one of the reasons when a couple gets married, they get married under a chuppah, a canopy that's open on 4 sides. The chuppah is a model of a home. Well, why do we have a chuppah at a wedding, a canopy? Because it symbolizes the home. That marriage is where you're beginning to start a home. So why is it open? Why not just have it closed on all 4 sides as a home is? So it's supposed to be a model of Abraham's tent, that our home is going to be an open home.
But it's also that the husband and wife, as unified as one soul, their thought, intention, action, and speech build all of the walls together through time.
Okay, that's a nice idea, but that's not the point. Okay. Everyone is entitled to give their own.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Now there's a caveat to all of this, and I know from experience. There's an expression in the Talmud when it comes to a guest, kabdehu, honor him, b'chashdehu, and suspect him. Because unfortunately there are some very unsavory people who pose as needy people, and they're out there to steal from you and to take advantage of your generosity. So when you have a guest that you don't know anything about, you have a right to be careful, to make sure that they don't rob you clean. Let's go to the story of Genesis. And he was sitting at the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day. Now, what was going on? He was sitting at the entrance of his tent. Remember, this is 3 days after circumcision at the age of 99. So he's now ailing, and it's extremely hot. So Rashi tells us that this was orchestrated by God. God did not want Abraham to run around serving guests just after he had the circumcision. So what did God do? He made it so hot that day that no human being would travel. So Abraham was distressed. This was more painful than the circumcision. He was distressed that he could not do an act of kindness. This man was addicted to kindness. That's what makes Abraham so special. It wasn't just he was a kind person that personified him, that defined who he was. So he's now in greater distress because he can't serve anyone. God sees that he's in distress. This is all part of God's plan, of course. So God sends 3 angels disguised as humans, whom Abraham invites into his home. So the first thing it tells you that Abraham not only liked to do acts of kindness, he was distressed when he couldn't do. That's a model to aspire to be distressed that we can't do an act of kindness. Then it says, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men. As soon as he sees them, he's already attracted to the possibility that he has now guests. Even though he's talking to God, as we said before, he's welcoming God, he's having a conversation with God, and the first thing he notices these 3 people. Excuse me. And he ran toward them. I don't have to tell you that after a bris, after circumcision, it's not a good idea to run. After my bris, I couldn't walk for a year. Or talk. But you're 99 years old, you just had major surgery, and he's running. why is the Torah telling us that? The Torah is not just throwing out irrelevant details. The Torah is trying to tell us that his love for God, this is not just love for humanity, this is part of his love for God. Again, that explains why he leaves God aside. It's not because he's forgetting about God. He's saying, God, I love you, and I know what you want me to do. I know you want me to bring them into my home. Then he says, take a little water. Even though water was not very important at that point, it wasn't for drinking, it was to wash their feet. He takes care of all their needs. And he tells them to rest under the tree, a comfortable place to rest. And the Midrash tells us that because he gave them a place to sit in the shade, God rewarded his children that they would have a mitzvah of dwelling in a sukkah. So when we dwell in the sukkah during the holiday we just had, it's a reminder of Abraham's hospitality. Then he says, I will take bread. He's offering only bread. What did he serve them? He served them a gourmet meal. Dairy, meat, and of course you might be thinking, how could you give dairy and meat together? We'll leave that for another time. The Torah wasn't yet given, so it wasn't forbidden, but that's just part of it. So why did he offer very little? So the Talmud says, this is to teach you that you should say little and do a lot. Promise little and do much more than what you promise. But it's more than just that. It's more than just don't be lavish in your promises. And then many people make big promises. They make pledges on high holy days. And when it comes to giving, they say, well, I really can't give that much. I'll give less. No, pledge a little and give much more. But here there was a special reason for it, because if you're going to offer to give a lot, the guest might feel very uncomfortable. This person is going all the way to serve me a gourmet meal. Maybe they don't even have the ability to do it. Maybe it's really sacrifice on their part. I don't want them to sacrifice for me. Make the guest feel, I'm only doing some bread, that's it, no big deal. Mm-hmm. So they feel comfortable, and then you could serve them the world. Then it says he rushed to the tent to Sarah, and then he gave it to the youth. The animals that had to be prepared, he gave it to his son, Yishmael, the youth. The idea is to get his family involved. Hospitality, sometimes the father and mother could be very hospitable, but the kids don't care about it. And the kids will say, oh, my parents are a little extreme. They're going out of their way. No, get them involved as well. That's the model of hospitality. The blank pages are the obligations of the guests. Yes?
Is that why the first, you mentioned Abraham and going in the sukkah, is that why we welcome Abraham the first night?
That could be a reason, yeah. That could be. Abraham is the main guest. We have 7 different guests coming to the sukkah. The main one is Abraham. And Abraham comes every night, actually. So that's maybe that's a good point. Yeah.
Rabbi, doesn't in Torah, doesn't Hashem say about Abraham? First of all, isn't he's the only person that Hashem says, "I love him"? I think in Torah, is that true?
I can't say with certainty, but most likely, yeah.
Anyway, he says the reason that I love him, he teaches his children my ways, and that's what you were just saying about getting the children involved.
Right. Abraham's greatness, I'm just reiterating what you just said, is that he didn't just keep it for himself, but he was able to transmit it. See, Noah was a righteous man. How do I know that? Because the Torah says that about him. But what was he missing? He was missing in the ability to transmit. Without the ability to transmit your values to other people, especially your own children and your own descendants, that righteousness has no effect. I mean, why do we give credit to Columbus for discovering America? The Vikings were here centuries before because nothing happened. They didn't develop anything. They don't get the credit. So the same way, Abraham gets the credit because he was able to perpetuate it. It was much more than just a once in a lifetime type of thing. It was a permanent thing, and the measure of permanence. Any other questions? Okay, who's going to be opening their homes for everyone for dinner tonight? Yes.
What are the obligations of the guest?
The guest has to do what it says in the Talmud. Whatever the host tells you to do, you do, except leave. Once he invites you in your home, he tells you get out, you don't get out. But everything else he tells you to do, the proper etiquette is to do it. So that's the main obligation of the guest. If they tell you to sit in this room, this place, then you sit there, you say, well, I'd like to sit at the other seat. No, it tells you to sit there, you do it. But if a smart host doesn't make big demands on the guests, a lot of it has to do with a little bit of intelligence on the part of the guest and the host. Any questions on Zoom? On the subject.
On the subject.
Before any other questions.
Oh my God. Yeah, the Bills gonna win.
Are the Bills going to win today? Was that the question?
Baruch Hashem. When is Seneca won?
I have to ask my son.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, everyone have a good week.